Welcome to Gettin Sauce, a podcast where two music nerds talk about their favorite songs and use them to inspire weird and wacky hot sauce recipes while consuming adult beverages. I'm your co-host, Mike King.
And I'm your other co-host, Wyatt Dozier. Today, we're going to be going over the title track, or the titular tune, some might say, of The Who's 1978 album, Who Are You? So, if you're at home, feel free to pause this broadcast and listen to the song itself on any of the official platforms that it may be on, or if not, just keep on listening here. We're going to be recapping the lyrics later in the show.
Over the course of the episode, we'll be using the lyrics and rock and roll history from Who Are You to inspire some funky hot sauce recipes. Make sure to check out our YouTube channel, The Weekly Drip, next week for the cooking competition style show where we actually create the hot sauces based on this week's conversation.
So we're going to be consuming some alcoholic beverages over the course of this recording, each episode, hence the title, Gettin Sauced. So if you are so inclined and you are, of legal age and all that good stuff, feel free to drink along. But of course, we do not condone excessive alcohol consumption, and we do not condone underage alcohol consumption. So if you do so responsibly and legally, feel free to join along. I'm drinking a margarita for this episode because I thought if I were going to be drinking something that made me wake up in a random doorway in Soho, it would probably contain tequila. Mike, what about you?
I thought a good theme for today would be Who Are You? Picking a drink that kind of is special to me, maybe my favorite drink. So today I am, of course, drinking my favorite alcoholic beverage, which is Guinness. And I'm going to open that up right now.
Excellent choice, sir. Before we jump into the questions here, I think let's give the audience just a quick rundown of, who we are, what we do here. So, Mike, who are you? Who?
Well, as you said, my name is Mike. I am a nerd, hot sauce aficionado, and music-obsessed human being currently living in the not so great state of North Dakota. I guess I can say that because if we have an audience in North Dakota, there can only be about 4 of them. So we're not losing too many listeners if I say that. Wyatt and I, we are, high school best friends who get together every couple weeks over Zoom or FaceTime or Skype and have a few drinks and talk about classic rock, and thought this podcast would be a fun way to do that and share that with the world. So how about you, Wyatt?
Well, you hit the nail on the head in terms of the friendship. Now, just to clarify, Mike has a much cooler choice of main instrument as a guitarist and a bassist primarily. I'm a tuba player. Why does a tuba player have such an interest in the realm of classic rock? Well, that's the music that I enjoy, but the public school program directed me towards the band instrument side of things. And I went really deep down a rabbit hole of brass instruments and kind of never escaped. So doing my best to try and get my hands around the bass and some of the more rock-centric instruments. But I've been making my ends meet from a gig standpoint, playing all of everyone's favorite classic rock and R&B bass lines on a sousaphone. And it seems to be working out pretty well so far. I also, in addition to my passion for music, really enjoy eating. Historically, it's been more of a quantity over quality type situation. Trying to do a little bit better in recent years about switching that equation around. So it just seemed like a natural fit to combine those two things with a venture like this, to combine music and something food related. Seems like an ideal fit. So if you hear me making weird references to tubas in any future episodes, now you know why. I'm sitting here in a room that has, only 2 tubas at the moment, but there's at least 4 or 5 floating around here somewhere. So I definitely have a problem.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I've got 7 or 8 guitars in my current room, so I definitely feel you there. Before I forget, make sure you tweet at the show at GetSaucePod to let us know what you're drinking while you listen. Wyatt, what do you say we go ahead and jump into some fan questions here?
Sounds fine and dandy to me.
All right. Unfortunately, this is our first episode, so we don't have any fans. But we do have a couple friends, so we're just going to read some friend questions here.
But we're about to, right, wishful thinking, shout out to you, the listener.
I don't know. You did go into a pretty long rant about tubas there, so you probably drove off anybody who already started.
That's right. Everyone's always like, why is it so hard for me to meet new people? And it's like, well, your intro to everyone is, let me tell you some facts about John Philip Sousa.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun segment for everyone to listen to.
Oh, I always like to keep my audience riveted.
All right. Our first fan question comes from Justin Clark. He asks, what makes for a better hot sauce? Loads of good flavor or more face-melting heat? What do you think, Wyatt?
Well, for me, my initial response is it too much to ask for both? But I think really what it's about is really the balance of flavors. I think when you start getting into some things that are less of a pleasant eating experience, it's because there's too much of one variable. It doesn't always necessarily have to be too much heat. You could have, too much acid. They put too much vinegar in it, or it's too pepper forward, or some of the other, secondary ingredients they put too much of in, too much heat, things like that. So I think it's really just about having a balance of flavors. And I think that's something that it takes time to develop a feel for. I'm still trying to figure that out. I made a small batch of sauce here just yesterday, trying to come up with a nice, kind of poblano lime thing.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up being really bitter because I didn't de-seed the peppers. I tend to, whenever I'm eating the peppers on their own, tend to leave the seeds in because I like the heat. But something I've realized, when you blend all that up, really gets a lot of bitter compounds in there. So it's still something I'm trying to figure out. But I think it's really balance of all of the flavors above all else for me.
Sure. And I will pose a counter argument to that. I will say, of course, flavor is important. There's no good hot sauce in the world that doesn't have good flavor, but I think you've got to have the heat. There are very, very few hot sauces in my fridge that aren't just mind-numbingly hot. I love a good, Carolina Reaper, a good ghost pepper, a good scorpion pepper. You've got to have one of those hotter peppers in there that really kick it over the edge, because that's what the goal is when you're adding hot sauce to your food most of the time, is kicking up the heat level a little bit there. So I think that is a very important part to have in the equation as well. Our next question comes from my little sister, Abby King, and she poses the question, how do you think modern rock bands will age compared to bands popularized during the classic rock era?
Well, that's interesting because there really aren't a lot of what I would classify as rock bands around anymore. And the ones that are mostly, kind of guitar driven generally fall into like the alternative category. But if I expand it more to just like pop in general, as in like, how's the popular music of today going to stack up, to popular music of yesteryear? It's one of those things that, we're just going to have to wait for time to pass to see what ends up holding up to the test of time.
Definitely.
I think previous generations always fall into the, the whole music was better at my day thing, because really the only stuff that we're hearing now that's being played on the radio stations, on the oldie stations, are the hits. So of course everything is good on those stations,
right,
because
it's survivor bias.
Yeah, it's taking the creme de la creme and skimming all the rest of it. I listened to a playlist just the other day at work that was the chart-topping song every month for the decade of the 70s, because of course I was. And there was a lot of not great stuff on there. A lot of really sappy ballads in the former half of the 70s, and in the latter half, it was pretty much alternating between Bee Gees and ABBA songs. And Mike, I know how you feel about ABBA. It makes you want to strangle people.
It does. I hate ABBA so much.
But I did like the Bee Gees in there. I do like the Bee Gees. Don't hate on the Bee Gees. I think we're, looking at a lot of the past eras with rose-colored glasses, because we're just seeing the best of the best, kind of ignoring, the stuff that didn't have the staying power. So every era is going to have the stuff that survives and the stuff that doesn't. It will be interesting to see how it shakes out. But, every era is going to have its classics. And I'm excited to see, what ends up becoming, the defining songs of this era. It's just, we're not going to know until we get there, folks.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think that definitely there are going to be certain aspects that survive, certain songs that kind of stand out above the rest. I also think that certain aspects of musicality will probably continue on that were developed during this era. if you listen to a lot of the songs that are playing on the radio today on the pop stations, the mixing is very different than it's ever been. There's a lot more going on in the background with like electronically, not necessarily using any handheld excuse me. I'm trying not to, use the word real instruments here. The soundboard mixing that's been happening today is very different and new than it's ever been. And I think that a lot of the stuff that's happening is going to carry over for decades to come, because although it can be overdone and can be done very poorly, there is a lot of it that it really can be done very nicely. And I think that Survivor Bias, that La Creme de la Creme, is going to hold over, and we're going to keep hearing that little by little in music for decades to come here.
Yeah, absolutely. That was well said.
And lastly, we have one more question from my fiance, Kim Zaralka, who asks, if you were picked to name the new world's hottest pepper, what would you name it?
The merciless chili peppers of Quetzalcoatlanango, created by the inmates of a Guatemalan insane asylum.
Is that a reference?
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that.
There is an episode of The Simpsons that Homer goes to a chili cook-off because he is known for being able to handle his spicy food very well. So Chief Wiggum, who I just did a terrible impression of, shout out to Hank Azaria, he decides he's going to source the hottest peppers that he can find to try and, dupe Homer and get him to make a fool out of himself in front of everyone, which he does. Homer then coats his mouth with candle wax so that he can stomach the peppers, but he ends up eating so many of the peppers that it causes him to hallucinate and wander off into the wilderness, where he has a vision. He hallucinates a coyote from space who is voiced by the great late Johnny Cash and goes on a spiritual quest as a result. Highly recommend if you haven't seen the good classic episodes of The Simpsons. I just had to sneak that reference in there.
I appreciate it. I think that a Simpsons reference would be a nice change in form for the world's hottest pepper. It's always like Reaper or Scorpion or or Ghost or all these like scary hot things that make you are supposed to fear the pepper. But I think a Simpsons reference would be a nice change of pace for the world's hottest pepper.
If you had a pepper that was called like the space coyote, you would eat that.
I would definitely eat that.
You would eat that.
I would absolutely eat that. That sounds incredible. I don't think we're going to come up with a better name than Space Coyote for our new pepper.
Yeah.
I think that's got to be it. So I think we're ready to move on with that.
Okay, all right. I didn't mean to steal your thunder there.
No, I was struggling to come up with something, and when you said Space Coyote, I think it just blew me away. I think we have to just go with that as the correct answer for the next world's hottest pepper. Go ahead and tweet at the show if you have a better answer, but you won't, so we're not going to get any tweets about that.
But still do try.
Yeah,
because
go for it.
I love seeing creativity in action.
Our next segment on the show is where we're going to go ahead and recap the lyrics to you. And when we were beta testing the show, we realized that just reading the lyrics verbatim into our microphones was very, very awkward. But of course, we can't continually pay the rights to these songs to just play the songs on our podcast because we're poor.
Yeah, read musicians.
Yeah. So, So what we decided to do is we're just going to make it as over dramatic as possible. So welcome to the Mike King and Wyatt Dozier ASMR lyrics section. Who are you? Who? Who are you? Who? Who are you? Who? Who are you? Who? I woke up in a Soho doorway. A policeman knew my name. Fuck, I'm just going to clap on that one. God fucking damn it. I woke up in a Soho doorway. A policeman knew my name. He said, "You can go to sleep at home tonight. if you can get up and walk away. I staggered back to the underground, and the breeze blew back my hair. I remember throwing punches around and preaching from my chair.
Well, who are you? I really want to know. Tell me, who are you? Because I really want to know. I took the tube back out of town, back to the rolling pin. I felt a little like a dying clown, with a streak of Rin Tin Tin. I stretched back and I hiccuped and looked back on my busy day. 11 hours in the tin pan. God, there's got to be a better way. Now there's a place you walked where love falls from the trees. My heart is like a broken cup. I only feel right on my knees. I spit out like a sewer hole, yet still receive your kiss. How can I measure up to anyone now after such a love as this?
Well, who are you? Tell me, who are you? Oh, I really want to know. Tell me, who are you? Come on, who? Oh, who the fuck are you? Thank you guys so much for bearing with us. If you skipped ahead through that, we don't blame you at all. That was just painful, I know. We're going to do that every single episode, and no, we will not be cutting that section, so don't even try to ask.
You know, as Mike said beforehand, we had a whole discussion about how we were going to handle the lyric recap, and, our ultimate conclusion, we just lean into the awkwardness, which really just describes how I have to get through my day-to-day life. You know, if you don't lean into it, if you don't embrace it, you're going to be ashamed of it. And you know what? We're not ashamed of how uncomfortably painful that lyric section is. You know what? We're going to own it. This is what we do. We do dramatic slam poetry readings of classic rock songs. All right. This is our life. This is what we do. We do this for you.
There's one part I really want to highlight there. And Wyatt, you and I have talked extensively about how the bass-driven music that I wrote for our lyrics section sounds like a porn backing track.
It absolutely does. If you add a funky guitar and maybe like a clavinet to that, that is just straight porno music.
And I didn't not think of that while I was writing it, but it still what I really didn't think of was what I was going to have to hear my high school friend whisper seductively into a microphone after hearing that song. The lyrics. I
prefer sultry. I think
sultry.
That's
really the word I was looking for. I'm so sorry I said seductive, but
I'm not sorry you said seductive.
But the lyrics, I only feel right on my knees. Yeah. I spit out like a sewer hole, yet still receive your kiss. How is that not about a blowjob? Like I don't.
Who's to say? This is sex, drugs, and rock and roll we're talking about. Anything is possible.
Pete Townsend did write this very, very hungover. Oh, which leads us into our next section, the trivia/history section of The Who, and of course the song "Who Are You?" And we'll go ahead and just while we're talking about it, kick off with the way that this song was written, which is one of my favorite stories of a classic rock songwriting. So, famously, Pete Townsend had been stuck in a royalties meeting with his agent all day, hence the lyric 11 hours in the tin pan, which is a reference to Tin Pan Alley, where he would have to go for his meetings. And after an 11-hour meeting, he got a very large royalties check and was so pissed off about the length of the meeting that he spent the entire check down at the local pub. The whole thing. That's a lot of booze. Like, A lot of booze.
Well, yeah, and I mean, when you're hanging out with a couple of punk musicians also at the time, the drinks will flow and the blood will spill, as Thin Lizzy once said. Yeah, so I believe he was hanging out, if I'm not mistaken, with a few members of the Sex Pistols.
Yes,
did
indeed.
you read that? Yes?
Yeah, I did read that.
So I can imagine you run into a couple characters like that. It's going to be a weird night. It's going to be a weird night for sure. So not surprised that he found himself, awoken in a strange place soon afterward.
Yes, yeah. As the song says, he woke up. I believe it actually ended up he was passed out in an alleyway, and a police officer recognized him and woke him up and said, "Hey, if you can get home, if you can walk in a straight line out of here, you're not going to jail. You can go home tonight." And his response to the police officer, in kind of a defiant way, was, "Well, who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you to tell me what to do here?" And then went home, slept it off, and in his hungover, probably still half drunken stupor the next day, wrote this fantastic song, which is just amazing to me.
It is amazing, I will say. Yes, we might be drinking on this show, and yes, this song is about drinking, but for everyone listening out there, don't try and solve your problems with alcohol. We're not endorsing this. It did just so happen, coincidentally, to, birth an absolute classic rock, one for the ages. But that doesn't mean that has to be your method for songwriting. So, be careful out there.
Yeah, no, just because Pete Townsend needs alcohol for creativity and we need alcohol for creativity doesn't mean you need alcohol for creativity. You guys might have a drinking problem. We've got a drinking solution.
That is a bold statement. Yeah, I really like everything in like the columns written about this is written in such a formal way. I really appreciate this entry in the Wikipedia article of all places, which, by the way, Wikipedia is not my only source. So, back off in the comments there. We do actual research too, but it's a nice place to start. And I really enjoy the way this is just particularly written. And I quote, "The song is unusual in that it contains 2 instances of the word fuck at 2:16 and 5:40, or 2:14 and 4:27 in the single edit version. Yet it has been played frequently in its entirety on rock radio stations."
And it still is. It 100% is. And if you listen closely when you hear this on your local rock station, it likely is not edited out.
Yeah, I can think of 2 songs off the top of my head that have F-bombs in them on the radio. One of them is this song, which you often hear, and the other is Louie Louie, where about halfway through the song, the drummer apparently drops one of his sticks, and it's not on the mic, but it's being picked up by other mics in the room. You just hear him go, "Fuck!"
I have never noticed that.
It's you have to. It's one of those things that like it's layered in the background, so it's not really that audible. So you have to be like actively listening for it, but it's in there.
So funny.
It's in there.
those are the of all songs too.
Yeah, so it's just a fun little tidbit there for you. Those are the only 2 F-bombs that I know of that have snuck their way onto radio. Do you know?
I'm sure there are others, but there are plenty of other swear words, cuss words, however you want to phrase it, that do get played with consistency on rock radio, even in the daytime hours. Like "Hair of the Dog" by Nazareth is one of my personal favorites.
Yes, love that song.
And one that we will likely cover on this show, because if I was flying an X-Wing towards the Death Star and could play one song on my way in, it would be "Hair of the Dog" by Nazareth.
Absolutely.
That's the most badass song ever written.
That is one of those. I mean, it's got strong cowbell game. It's got nice, talk box guitar going on.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
the lyrics themselves just phenomenal.
Well, and the very clever pun for the song title.
Yeah.
But, just in any time I'm trying to hype myself up in a situation, and I just want to be like, feel unstoppable, just like, son of a bitch,
Yeah. Back when I tried to convince myself that I was an athlete, my warm-up song was "Hair of the Dog" by Nazareth. And
yes,
and
this is
now that I no longer consider myself an athlete, it is just the song that I that I listen to while I sit on the couch and play video games. So
Little insight for the listeners here. Mike wasn't always the music nerd that we know and love him as today. Back when we were in high school, the early days of high school, he was like full-on sportsman, which me using the term sportsman just goes to show you where I stand in the whole athletics department. He was definitely initially not of the social reject circle that I was in at the time, but he ended up joining our brass band as a trumpet player to replace someone who graduated through the recommendation of a good mutual friend of ours. And he's like, yeah, I know this Mike kid. He's going to be great. And I was like, I don't know. Isn't he like the baseball, football guy? Like, I don't know how he's going to mesh with us. And then less than a year later, he was traveling with us to DCI finals in Indianapolis, nerding out about the Phantom Regiment. And I'm just so happy that we converted you into a nerd.
To our listeners at home, I'm so sorry for the marching band and sousaphone references you've had to endure over this podcast, over this classic rock and roll and hot sauce podcast. But although I will apologize for it, Wyatt absolutely will not stop talking about it. So it's something you can definitely expect in future episodes.
Actually, Michael, at the time, sousaphones were not legalized in Drum Corps International.
Oh my God. Right.
They were contrabass bugles.
This is just too much. Back to the Who here, really quick.
Yes. Back to the Who. Wait. Who are we talking about again?
Yeah, who are you? Who? A few fun facts about the band. Not that I think any of our listeners. Hold on 1 second. Lola was barking. I'm gonna wait, make sure she's done.
That's a cue for one of our future episodes to be Who Let the Dogs Out?
/ Lola by the Kinks.
/ Lola by the Kinks. Who Let the Dogs Out and this song, both with, large sections repeating of the word who. It's who versus who. We could leave this all in.
Blooper reel.
You know what? All right. Shout out to Zia, our fantastic audio engineer. I'm going to leave this up to you. You can leave this in or not. This is totally your call. Surprise me.
So getting back to the band, just wanted to give a few more things. Not that any of our listeners really need too much of an introduction to the Who, I would think. They are one of the most influential English rock bands of all time. I don't think that anybody would argue with me making that point. In case you need a little bit of a background, they originally went by a couple different names. They were called the Detours and then the High Numbers. Wyatt, would you agree with me that they eventually settled on the correct name for their band?
Yeah, I think they picked a winner there at the end.
Yeah, definitely. I think that sometimes, with at least the current younger generation that didn't grow up with this music, it can be confusing because there's another very, very talented rock group about a decade later called the Guess Who?
Right.
Who had a very great story about why they chose that name. It's still fantastic name, much better than the Detours and the High Numbers. They released their first album by the name of My Generation in 1965, making them one of the earlier bands in the English rock scene, along with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. And they were really well known for their wild stage antics. So they were kind of one of the first bands to go on stage and smash their guitars, and they'd bring car crashes on stage as their on stage art and stuff like that. So they were kind of known to be pretty wild.
It was once during a TV performance, Keith Moon actually put explosives in his bass drums on his kit, detonated them during the show, and it actually fucked some people up. It actually caused some injuries on stage because it was literal explosives. He blew himself up, basically.
Yeah.
He's just absolute mad lad.
There are many entries. When I was looking up, stories about the Who, very few stories about the Who don't end with one or multiple of them in the hospital. They were one of those crazy rock and roll bands, which more power to them. That's a great scene if you can get into it. Right along with that, they actually, for a brief time in 1976, held the Guinness Book of World Records record for the loudest concert, which is a pretty impressive feat, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to go through the personnel as well for this. So this is, of course, the usual Who lineup with Roger Daltrey on lead vocals, Pete Townsend on the guitars and the synths, the great John Entwistle on bass, and Keith Moon on the drums. This was actually the last album to feature Keith Moon before his untimely death due to his, rampant, out of control drug use. There was also Rod Argent on piano and Andy Fairweather Lowe on backing vocals, specifically for this track. So very, very influential for the fact that this was the last record with the original drummer. Just a fantastic skill on the kit. You can really hear, his
some
great
might say
on this one.
explosive skill on the kit.
His explosive skill on the drums.
But
Fun little Keith Moon tidbit. There was actually a concert that The Who was playing where he passed out in the middle of the show because he was on horse tranquilizers, allegedly.
Oh my God.
And so they're in the middle of their set, so like, what are you going to do? Daltrey announces on the mic, he goes, "Does anyone in the audience know how to play drums?" And this kid steps up, raises his hand. They bring him on stage. I think he was maybe 16 or 17 years old at the time. His name was Thomas Scott Haplin. And this kid got to play drums for a concert with The Who because Keith Moon passed out. Can you imagine?
What a dream come true.
You're going to see your favorite band, your teenager, and then someone goes, "It's an emergency. Is there a drummer in the house?" And you get to play the drums with the freaking Who. I mean, how cool is that?
That's absolutely phenomenal. I love it.
Yeah, there's video footage of this concert. I highly encourage you all to check it out. I cannot even begin to imagine how awesome that was. And good for him. Good for him. I mean, talk about a story to tell your grandkids,
Yeah, no kidding.
I ever tell you about that time I played drums for The Who when Keith Moon passed out on horse tranquilizers?
Yeah, all right, shut up, Gramps.
Take your pill.
It's time for Hot Takes.
Wyatt, what were your reactions to the music?
Well, something that I didn't realize are all of the different edits that exist. Most of the time that I've heard it, being played on the oldie stations, you end up getting kind of an abbreviated radio edit. Number one, I think a few of the stations have caught on to the, censorship thing and have, cut out those little, the little F-bombs in there.
Yeah.
And it also, there's a decent chunks of the songs that are missing. I don't know, some people might view this as kind of an old-fashioned approach, but I think, if the artist wrote a song in a certain way, you should play it in its entirety, even
I
if it
fully
might not
agree
be,
with you. Yep.
radio friendly. I mean, think about, they tried to radio edit Bohemian Rhapsody before it got released because they thought it was too long and too weird. You think about how much of a tragedy it would have been if Bohemian Rhapsody got cut down. Play the whole song. The full edit of the song is what, 6.5 minutes?
That's nothing. That's nothing.
Somewhere around in there. Just play the whole song. Listening to it actually in its entirety, I think a much more satisfying experience. Any radio DJs listening out there, play the full song. Just play the full song. It's
Definitely.
nice.
Absolutely, yeah. If your job depends on you making time, you just quit your job and play the whole song. Well... It's more important. You got to do it for the music.
And in terms of actually getting into musical elements, I think I really like the kind of syncopated synthesizer thing going on in the beginning. Some really good bass work as well in that little intro that, I think sometimes doesn't quite get noticed as much.
Yeah, definitely.
But listening to it with some headphones and actually really giving it a good deep listen, really appreciate Entwistle's bass work. And I think it's one of the catchiest hooks. The little chorus, great harmonies. I remember this is one of the first songs that I ever got stuck in my head. Outside of the dumb nursery rhymes that they teach you as a kid. I remember being maybe 3 or 4 years old, and there was some car commercial that had that song in the background, and I was humming it around the house, and my dad was like, "How do you know that song?" I was like, "I don't know. I heard it somewhere." He was like, oh, that's a good song. And I could tell he was really glad that I was taking an interest in that whole genre. But this is one of the first earworms that I can remember. Do you have a specific memory of being like a young kid and getting a song stuck in your head?
Oh, all the time. But of course, when I was a young kid, I was mostly listening to like shitty Paralyzer by Finger 11 and like early 2000s like rock and stuff. I didn't listen so much to classic rock until I was a little bit older.
There's nothing wrong with that, you know.
That Paralyzer by Finger 11, I shouldn't have called it shitty. It is the first CD I ever bought when I was a child, and I will stand by young Mike King in my entirety. I think that was not a terrible choice for a young child to make. But yeah, I think you made a great point about the Who. They have a great ability, and especially Pete Townsend with his songwriting, to write these like really catchy hooks that just get stuck in your brain, and like you're always thinking about them. Think about like My Generation, talking about my generation. It just like, it stays in there forever, right? I came home last night and Kim was cooking, and wow, that's a very old-fashioned. I do not live in a 1950s household. But I came home one particular night and my fiance was cooking for me. That is not the norm. And
so I got this broad making dinner for me, see? The old ball and chain.
And she was singing Behind Blue Eyes by The Who. And she did not know that we were doing, The Who for our episode today, but I don't know when she had heard it, but she said it had been stuck in her head for days. She just couldn't stop singing it. And I think that's just such a talent to write things that just stick with you, and Pete Townsend is one of the best.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, even just theme songs, this song ended up being a TV show theme song, and so did Baba O'Reilly,
Yep, it did.
My brain wanted to say Teenage Wasteland there, and I was like, I know that's not the title.
Nope.
I was like, you gotta say it right. You gotta say it right, or they're gonna come after you. I was like, what is it? What is it?
I was mixing up with the Nirvana song. What's the Nirvana song that is teenage in the title?
You talking about Smells Like Teen Spirit?
Yeah. I was mixing up the titles.
That one might actually not be a bad episode idea. You see, it's funny.
Do we really want to create a hot sauce that smells like Teen Spirit?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So you see, we're just riffing on ideas here with the pilot. I was like, oh, there's an episode idea for you. No, so Teen Spirit was apparently a deodorant brand at the time, a popular deodorant brand. So the title of that song, somebody was making a joke in the band because they were saying that he was hanging out too much with his girlfriend at the time, and that was apparently her deodorant brand. So somebody spray painted Kurt Smells Like Teen Spirit on the wall to like mess with him. But then he was like, smells like Teen Spirit sounds like a really rebellious thing, like if they don't know. And that's where that came from.
Oh, that's great.
You'll get to hear that trivia point annoyingly repeated if we do an episode on that.
A little Easter egg for those of you who listen from episode 1.
Yeah, little Easter egg. If you go back to the pilot, you'll hear them talking about Nirvana and also Thin Lizzy. Anything but the Who, apparently.
Yeah, well, there's just not that much to talk about, I guess.
Oh, yeah,
The Who.
This band, yeah, flash in the pan.
One-hit wonder, The Who.
Come on.
All right, what do you say we move on to flavor notes?
Let's do it.
Flavor notes. Flavor notes.
I don't think lyrically we have a whole lot to work with as far as creating a hot sauce based on this song can go. But I think we can still kind of sift a few ideas from it, right?
Right. There are a few things. I mean, you've got a kind of a New York setting, which could, provide some inspiration. I've got, the lyric step back and I hiccuped. I always, when I encounter a certain level of spice and I'm not sure what that threshold is, I always get the hiccups. I don't know if, are you one of the hiccup spicy people? Because I am.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if I try to wash it down with anything carbonated. It gets me right away.
It's funny because it happens not at a super high level. So then everyone's like, oh man, this guy can't hang. Like he can't handle the spice because I'm like hiccuping. Like, I don't know. Like my only frame of reference is like, if you go through like the Hot Ones lineup per se, I'm going to start hiccuping at like number 6 or 7, or like something like that. And, it's like, oh, But I don't know. It's just something weird. I don't know, maybe a decent amount of heat, something that could be potentially, New York specific. Were you
Sure.
pulling anything out of this?
Yeah, well, first I wanted to go back and apologize because when I was talking about the songwriting, I mentioned Tin Pan Alley and I was talking about England. Of course, the song talks about Soho. Tin Pan Alley is in New York. I'm an idiot. This is based in New York, so we should not be pulling, even though it's an English band, so I assumed we should be pulling New York flavors, not English flavors, which is great because I did not want to make a breakfast tea hot sauce.
Yeah, this is Earl Grey, but really fucking hot.
Yeah.
Within the spirit of this pilot, the crew of the Who crew, were really upset about some of the people actually catching on to the couple of fucks that were given in this song. And they actually posted apparently a label on the outside of the album jacket that was like complaining about censorship and stuff like that. So, they were really outspoken about this. So in that spirit, in the rock and roll spirit,
Fuck it.
fuck it.
All right.
Yeah.
As far as hot sauce goes, I think, the whole song is written about a night when Pete Townsend spent a whole lot of money on booze. So I think a main ingredient, we should definitely have some sort of alcohol in our hot sauce, I think, right? That makes sense?
Yeah, this is aggressiveness. If you listen to, the vocal performance from Daltrey, really aggressive, really harsh. It's about, being jaded about, where your life is, where society is and everything. It's a rough experience. I don't think this is going to be a pleasant flavor. This is going to be something that kind of assaults the senses.
Oh, yeah. It's going to punch you in the face, no doubt.
It's going to punch you in the face. Yeah, it's going to be abrasive.
And that's a lyric, actually.
Yeah.
He woke up throwing punches. Yeah, that's a good lyric.
Yeah,
We'll definitely
definitely
use
definitely gonna have to be a red pepper, I think. Red pepper, really hot, really abrasive. Potentially, I'm thinking if we're doing a New York component and it's red, maybe a tomato component. Ode to New York
I could see it.
pizza.
I could see it.
perhaps? I don't know. I tend to really like sauces that include maybe a little bit of a hint of tomato. Not like a hot tomato sauce per se, like going that far, but if you throw a little bit in there, I think it adds a little bit of depth,
All right. That's not something I've worked with too much, but I can definitely give it a shot.
I'll tell you. I mean, if you ever have some of that certain variations of the red sauce that they put on certain Tex-Mex,
Yeah, definitely.
that's got a tomato component, and that is it's such a deep flavor with some nice kick to it as well.
Cool. I think we can definitely go ahead and throw that in there then. That sounds good to me. And then I had one thing that I thought was a good idea since, this is our first episode. We're titling it Who Are You? The song is by The Who. We're talking about who we are. I thought maybe we could each include an ingredient that is special, unique to our cooking style, our palate. So maybe,
I like that.
I'm from Chicago. Maybe I'll use a little bit of the spicy Chicago style cooking in there, Got a little bit of that Southern style to you, like fried chicken, maybe something that goes on that. Whatever it is, we'll come up with something that is very unique to us, kind of introducing, who are you, who we are into the sauce.
Well, I've got something in mind. It might end up being a bit of a cliche throughout this show, but you know what I really like to add a unique acidic note to sauces?
Oh, yes.
I really like to put limes in things. The drink that I'm currently drinking is composed pretty much 50% from limes. I like putting limes in everything that I cook, and sometimes I overdo it.
I can't think of a single time that you have put too much lime. For the folks at home, I would not be surprised to come over to Wyatt's house and see him sitting on the front porch eating a lime as if it were an apple.
Just word to the wise, if you're going to be out in the sun for significant periods of time and you're consuming something with a large amount of lime juice in it, be sure to, wash your hands, wash your face, anywhere that the juice has made contact with you, externally. Make sure to be very thorough about cleaning that off because lime juice plus sunlight equals a really bad time. I'm going to save the details for that
There
for a
are
later episode.
still burn marks on Wyatt's chest. We'll leave it at that.
I'm still scarred to this day. So this is a public service announcement. Lime juice not to be trifled with. But, it's a love-hate relationship that we have, and I take her back every time.
All right. We ready to put a cap on it?
I think we are ready to put a cap on it.
Alrighty.
Put a cap on it.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and put a cap on it for the week. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Weekly Drip to watch our video next week when we actually make our own versions of the hot sauce we described during this episode. It's a cooking competition style show where you get to be the judge. Some ingredients to keep an eye out for in our hot sauces include New York flavors, a very harsh, hot sauce this week. We're going to throw a little bit of alcohol in there, maybe a tomato base, and some sort of Who Are You themed flavor that's unique to Wyatt and my own palate. Please remember to like, subscribe, and review our podcast on iTunes. Wyatt, if you had to describe the flavor of this week's episode in one word, what would it be?
I'm going to go with
Ooh. We got to throw like a little effect on that.
Yeah, put some reverb on that.
I love it. All right. We'll catch you guys next week.